Every year, the HACR Research Institute publishes landmark studies on both corporate best practices and the state of the Hispanic community around its 4 pillars. HACR research drives thought leadership and empowers stakeholders to create a more inclusive corporate America that both works with and invests in the Hispanic community. Every initiative encourages data-driven analysis and focuses on problem solving. These principles promote awareness of new developments and encourage the community to share new and innovative solutions. The jewel in the crown of HACR research is the highly anticipated annual Corporate Inclusion Index. No publication has more impact on decisions involving Hispanic diversity and inclusion in corporate America today. In order to recognize those companies that the index has proven to be the true leaders in Hispanic diversity and inclusion, the HACR Research Institute created the Corporate Inclusion Index Awards. These awards highlight those 5-star companies whose Hispanic inclusion efforts and strategies have yielded the absolute best results. For close to 35 years, HACR has led the way in supporting Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. Come be a part of the movement. Come be a part of our community.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for HACR's webinar on Understanding Workplace Barriers for Latinas. My name is Lisette Garcia, and I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at HACR, and I will be your moderator today. We're excited to have this discussion today with you all, and we have some wonderful panelists who will be sharing their thoughts, their ideas, their experiences, and lessons that they've learned throughout their careers on what companies can do to advance Latinas in the workplace. Joining us today on behalf of our sponsor is Jessica Kanya. Jessica Kanya is the National Sales Support and Optimization Executive for Bank of America, and Bank of America has been a longtime partner to HACR. They deserve a huge thank you for their commitment to be our Latina Champion sponsor this year. So please welcome Jessica to give a few remarks on behalf of Bank of America.
Thank you, Lisette. Good afternoon and welcome everyone. And thank you to HACR for hosting this virtual session. As Lisette mentioned, Bank of America has a well-established partnership with HACR, and I am very excited about our commitment to be HACR's Latina champion. At Bank of America, we understand the importance of diversity in our workforce as a business imperative, and we are committed to investing in Latino communities by being a great place to work. As a result, we have been recognized by Latina Style magazine in its top 50 best companies to work for list 20 times. I am incredibly proud of the action Bank of America has taken to build on our long-standing effort to advance racial equality and economic opportunity, whether it's our $1 billion four-year commitment, our new Smithsonian Institute initiative, or our focus on attracting, retaining, and developing diverse talent. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of mentorship and sponsorship as strategies for development and career advancement. Sponsorships and alliances are critically important. As Latinas, we need them and we need to be them. Allies can be some of the most effective and powerful voices in our career journeys and really help us to feel included. I do want to share a quick video on the importance of alliances.
If I hadn't had allies looking out for me, I don't know if I would be here today.
Being a good ally is creating an environment that's safe, that's honest.
Ultimately, an ally is a selfless leader that's willing to do the right thing.
It's somebody who's reaching across and helping somebody else get to where they want to be by taking a chance, by taking a risk, by putting themselves out there.
They stand up for you when maybe sometimes you're not able to stand up for yourself.
Because one person, advocating and being kind to another person leads to having a domino effect.
They'll give you good advice if you ask for it, or they'll hold it if you tell them, I don't want advice, I just want to tell you what I'm feeling.
Someone who will support you through thick and thin, someone who will allow you to be yourself, someone who can be a confidant, someone who can step up for you and serve as your shield. And that's who I consider an ally.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to Bank of America for your support, partnership, and commitment to our work and the Hispanic community more broadly. So now, before we get started, a few housekeeping remarks for you all. Everyone is muted and will remain that way for the duration of the webinar. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, please use the question box in your GoToWebinar panel to communicate with the HACR team. Someone will help troubleshoot your problems as soon as possible. If you have any questions for the panelists, please also use the questions box in your GoToWebinar panel to ask those questions at any time throughout the conversation. The panel will try to address as many questions as possible as we go. This webinar is being recorded, and the link to the recording will be shared with you within 24 hours. So now, without further ado, let's get started. So if I told you there was a population that was one of the fastest growing populations in the United States, that was the second largest Hispanic population in the world, and that in getting involved with them, you'd be investing in the 8th largest and 3rd fastest growing economy in the world, wouldn't you want to connect with that population? If I also told you that that population had a median age of 28 and makes up a growing proportion of the entrepreneurial sector in the United States and has a buying power of $1.7 trillion, wouldn't you want to connect with that population? And if I told you that as demographics continue to shift in the United States, that that population is who your company is going to be relying on largely to propel you into the next series of decades of success, wouldn't you want to include them in your leadership? Well, that population, my friends, is the Hispanic population in the United States. But when we look at Hispanics in leadership in corporate America, the research that HACR has conducted over the years shows us these numbers, that roughly about 7% of board directors are Hispanics, 6% of executives are also Hispanic. And when we break that executive category down to look at individuals and their reporting levels from the CEO, 5% are direct reports, 6% are 2 reporting levels to the CEO, and 5% are 3 reporting levels from the CEO, of a population that within the next few years is poised to be about a quarter of the population of the United States. And when we look at that population and look at Latinas specifically, only 3% are board directors, 2% executives, 1% of those executives being direct reports to the CEO, and 2% being 2 reporting levels from the CEO, and 3 being 3 reporting levels from the CEO. So what's going on? Why aren't companies capitalizing on this talent to help lead them into the future? Joining me today to talk about this and share their thoughts, experience, and their advice on what folks and companies can do to change these numbers are Jessica Kanya, the National Sales Support and Optimization Executive for Bank of America. Jessica has held numerous roles with Bank of America, and in recognition of her leadership and contributions to the organization, she received a 2012 Leadership Excellence Award, a 2015 Performance Excellence Award, and a 2019 Diversity and Inclusion Award. She is also a founding member of the Consumer and Small Business Employee Engagement and Inclusion Council and a member of the Lead for Women, Women in Technology and Ops, and OLA. Jessica is passionate about developing people and focused on developing talent in underrepresented groups. So please welcome Jessica. Our next panelist is Vargas, founder of the Latinista. Yai Vargas is a multicultural marketing and diversity consultant with 15 years of professional experience in building business strategy and community engagement programs specifically for employee engagement via ERG or BRG groups. She has expertise in developing and delivering training for career and leadership development that ties to the organization's bottom line. Jai is also the founder of the Latinista, a national network of women and Latina professionals invested in professional development and career mobility, with chapters in New York City, Chicago, Miami, LA, and San Diego. Please welcome Yai. So ladies, thank you for joining me today for this discussion. I'm excited to be here with you and excited to share your knowledge with our audience. So let's start by telling everyone a little bit about your career trajectory and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Good morning. So I have been in the financial services industry 20 years. And when I started in this business, I did not expect it to turn into a career. It was kind of by accident. I was studying to be a technologist and I needed to get a job. So I went to a temporary agency, never expecting again that 20 years later that job was going to turn into my career. I really found myself driven by the impact that we could have to the financial lives of our clients and by the diversity of roles in the financial segment. I never realized kind of all the different roles and areas that existed in that space. And I started in the business in an operations production role. After about 3 years, I moved into regulatory compliance. The financial services industry is highly regulated, and I found the space very interesting. I spent about 10 years there leading functions like quality control, new law implementation, regulatory engagement. And after managing to navigate the financial crisis, I came out on the other side and felt like I needed to reinvent myself. So I took a bit of an accounting of, what are the things that drive me? What are the experiences that I have? And I found a few themes. So one, I am very results oriented. I enjoyed roles that allowed me to impact results. I am very organized. So I am that person that my closet is organized by color and size and style. I like to create organization and efficiency for our employees and our clients. And ultimately, I am fulfilled when I am in roles that allow me to lead and connect with our teams because I am very passionate about bringing others up and helping to develop others. So about 7 years ago, I took the risk and made a leap out of compliance and risk. And since then, I have held several different roles enabling our client-facing teams through business support, process and systems design, change management. And recently I took on a new role in the home loan sales organization, leading national biz support and sales optimization. But when I think about my career journey, I don't just think about the functional roles that I have had. I am very fortunate to work for a firm that allows me to have an impact through other areas. So I'm very engaged in our employee resource groups, our market leadership network, our Hispanic Latino Executive Council. I am the COO for the council, and I have the esteemed pleasure of partnering with our co-chairs to act as the Hispanic Latino voice for the organization and help to drive our Hispanic Latino strategy.
Wonderful. Thank you. Jai?
Thank you, Dr. Lisette. Hi, everyone. Thank you, HACR. My name is Jai. I spent about 15 years in corporate America. I was, for the majority of the time, working on multicultural marketing and diversity strategy. What does that mean? I was helping organizations figure out how to create products, services, and tools for the multicultural communities. I did that for quite some time. My last stint in corporate America was for about 9 years in financial services as well. I had an incredible time in corporate America. I actually built and led many employee resource groups in the Latino space, in the women's space, as well as the LGBT ally space. It's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. About 2 years ago, I decided to go out on my own as a consultant, particularly to help organizations that didn't have someone like me doing diversity strategy and recruiting consulting. And so my job now, I've dedicated 100% of my time to helping these organizations figure out how they can leverage their current diversity and inclusion so that it impacts their hiring processes, their product development, their communications, their culture, as well as impacting the bottom line. About 8 years ago, I started an organization called the Latinista. It's for Latinas and women of color who are really invested and interested in learning new career and business leadership skills. And so we have thousands of women across the country in a number of chapters. And our core mission is to help them really dig deep and understand their values. And we have really difficult conversations. The reason that I built this community and organization was because I didn't see an organization really preparing me and my community and my women for business leadership skills. And so that's exactly what I did. We focused on negotiating skills, how to be a confident public speaker, your personal and executive brand, how to find or become a mentor or a sponsor, how to delegate on a team where you've never been taught to be a leader. And so I really built this network, not just by myself, but with thousands of Latinas and women of color across the country. And our mission is really to just help them advance without them having to go back to school or to spend a lot of time or money in doing so. This report for Latinas in the workplace that HACR has put together is something that I live every day, not just personally, but through all of my network and my community. So I'm so excited to be here and looking forward to diving into some of the results.
Thank you, Jai, for sharing that. So a moment ago, I had a slide up, and let's see if we can get it back up on the screen here, that looked at Latinas in leadership. So what do you think is going on here?
You know, I think something that stood out to me was the fact that we don't have representation. And as a matter of fact, I think you shared this with me as well. We don't even have a Latina CEO in the Fortune 50 or Fortune 100 or Fortune 500, which is, you know, something really difficult to hear. And over so many years, we did have one up until recently, up until last year. You know, and that something that people share with me quite often is the fact that Latinas and women of color are opening up businesses at an incredible rate. But what they don't realize is that it's not really on purpose, and it's not really because they want to, it's because they're leaving the corporate workspace because of so many of the challenges that we're going to be speaking about today. And so I really love the fact that you shared a lot of these insights and that you asked these really difficult questions.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think the problem is representation, and you know, I mentioned sponsorship and allies in the introduction. We need to have senior leaders that are identifying diverse talent and helping to sponsor them and mentor them so they can bridge the gap from those lower level or more frontline roles into the more senior levels of the organization.
So all great points. And I think in just a few moments, we're going to talk about sponsorship. We're going to talk about mentorship, but let's talk a little bit about some of the other experiences first. And then we'll go on to talking about some of the things that can help women advance. So, you know, one of the challenges that I think women face in the workplace, and that a significant amount of research has shown over the years, is that, you know, there are gender stereotypes that folks have, and that those stereotypes give rise to biased judgments and decisions, which often impede the advancement opportunities for women. And additionally, that even when women are excellent workers, they're high achievers, they have received accolades for the work that they've done, they don't always view that in the same way. And in fact, they often doubt their own abilities. They often give praise to someone else who maybe helped them a tiny bit with what they've accomplished. I think most folks refer to this as the imposter syndrome. And actually, I'm seeing the questions come in from the audience as they're feeding, and someone has already asked a question about imposter syndrome. And so it's great that this is sort of our lead off question today. So, have you ever felt this way throughout your career? And what advice would you give to others about, dealing with imposter syndrome and overcoming it?
Yeah, so I can share that I've experienced all of those things. I mean, for me personally, I find that praise or recognition almost elicits this feeling of I'm not worthy. Let me deflect that praise and say, well, I could have done this other thing better, almost waiting for the person to realize I'm not good enough. I don't belong here, right? Back to that imposter syndrome. And as women, as Latinas, we are often our own worst critic. We, instead of celebrating wins, can focus on those imperfections or beat ourselves up over a mistake or a missed opportunity, which can impact our confidence and ultimately our willingness to speak up. And I would say that our white male counterparts, they make a mistake and they move right on. There's no beating up, there's this resilience. And, as Latinos, we are resilient people. I think we need to focus and leverage that resilience to give ourselves grace when we do make a mistake or have a missed opportunity, as well as really take time to perform self-assessments, put on paper what are the accomplishments, what are the results and impacts that you've had, and reflect on that and remind yourself you're valuable, you belong at the table, you deserve a seat, and ultimately use that to be able to tell your story, because sometimes being able to speak about the results and tell the story is as important as the results, and our counterparts are doing a better job about speaking about their praises and accomplishments, and ultimately are going to get noticed when we're doing more than they are.
I completely agree with that. Self-promotion is key. And I think I share the same experience as many people who have immigrated just like I have. So I came to the United States from Dominican Republic when I was 3 years old to New York City. And when I entered into corporate America, I was 18 years old, huge headquarters, an international company. And I always led with the fact that my mom was always saying, be grateful. And I think a lot of people share that. Be humble. Thank goodness you have an incredible organization and a company paying you this much money. Just keep your head down, work really, really hard, and one day somebody will notice your accomplishments. And one day you will be compensated and rewarded. Well, it doesn't really work that way in corporate America. I think it's certainly an evolution and a journey for some women to be able to find their voice. And for those that can't or have difficulty in doing some of that and experience the imposter syndrome, and for those that don't understand what imposter syndrome is and are wondering if you've ever experienced it, is being in a room, let's say a boardroom, where you're constantly doubting if you belong there, where you're always thinking, oh my goodness, how in the world did I get into this room? Are they going to figure out that my boss should be in here and not me? Oh my goodness, I only have a bachelor's degree. I don't have my MBA. How can I help this organization make these types of decisions? I don't think I belong here. And so that goes hand in hand with the challenge of self-promotion. And it's an evolution, it's a journey. And I think that many of us have to find either that voice within ourselves or someone who's a champion for us to remind us of everything, like you said, Jessica, that we've achieved. My goodness, you have an associate's or a bachelor's or a certification. You are an incredible researcher. You've taught yourself Canva or Trello or Asana all by yourself. And you've gone above and beyond what was expected of you. I think we always have to keep tally on our accomplishments, not even daily, but quarterly, making sure that we don't just know this, but that our managers and people that are overseeing us are reminded. They have so many other people that they have to worry about and they have to keep tabs on. It's important for us to remind ourselves and them of what we've accomplished, so that when it comes to quarterly review or annual review, you're like, by the way, let me remind you what I've accomplished this year. This is why I'm asking for a salary increase, right? And if there are things that I need to work on, then okay, I will write all of those things down and I'll work on them for the next 3 to 6 months. And then we'll have this conversation again, right? Are you going to support me and actually fund the development that I need and deserve? It's a much bigger conversation, but there is such an incredible lack of Latina leadership. We need to also bring people along with us when we do have that opportunity and that ability to hire and source talent.
Great point. So I want to pick up on something that you said, Jai, which is, you know, about promoting your accomplishments. And, you know, I know sometimes that can be a challenge in general for Hispanics, right? There's a little bit of a cultural mismatch in terms of how many of us have been raised and what makes you successful in corporate America. But it is also almost a double-edged sword for women, even beyond that, because women who are perceived as highly competent and who are successful are often seen as less likable, right? There's that too tough, too bossy, too the other word, right, that I don't need to say. And so, you know, what advice, Jai, would you give, or Jessica, would you give based on your experiences to others on, you know, how they can handle that, you know, if they're faced with a situation where they're, you know, competent, highly competent, but seen as less likable?
So I have to share that early in my career, I was told I was too assertive. And so, and some other words. And so I overcompensated, I adjusted my volume, my cadence, and became so agreeable that then I was told I needed to work on my executive presence, right? I had swung too far. And so I had this realization that hopefully others can learn from, so they don't have to learn the way I did, is that you can adapt your style based on your audience, but you have to remain authentic and leverage your strengths. I am a passionate Latina, and you hear it in my voice and my tone and how I present. And instead of coming away from that, lean into it.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love the question in the chat. How can you advocate for yourself without putting too much crema on your tacos while competing with your white counterparts? I love that. Thank you for sharing that. You know, I think it's called a humble brag, and also having other people sing your praises as well, so that you don't seem like you're boasting. I actually teach quite a bit of people on how to do humble bragging, which I call thought leadership online, on LinkedIn, on the internet sites. You know, you don't have to be like, hey, look at me, this is what I've accomplished, look at all of my awards. You just have to remind people that you're making a difference for a particular community. And it's not about you, it's about the greater good of the organization. Hey, these are the programs that I just launched to help this organization, this department, and this community. And it's going to have an impact, a positive impact on our organization. And I didn't do it just by myself. I led the charge, but Maria also helped me do this, right? And just constantly doing that humble brag, but making sure that the focus is on the overall department, organization, and community, and why you're doing it is so important. So it's not just you know, telling people that you're winning these accolades and collecting awards, because they don't matter to people. It's who you're doing it for and why is that so important.
So about a year ago, HACR launched the Latina Empower Her initiative. It is a research project, and was also, we just held the inaugural Empower Her event, where we brought together Latina leaders in corporate America to talk about their experience. The survey had close to 600 folks that participated in it, and you know, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that they shared on their experiences, and hear your thoughts and your practical words of wisdom on what folks facing these situations can do, because I'm sure that not just only the folks who took the survey are the ones that have had these experiences, but that these are much broader. So let's talk first about feeling valued in the workplace, right? So our respondents were asked about feeling valued in the work that they do and within their corporation. And, just over half of them said that they felt valued. 6% felt that they didn't feel valued at all within their corporation, and sort of the balance were along a gradient scale there in terms of their feeling of value. But part of what motivates people to come to work and to do a good job is the meaning and the value that they get from that experience. I'd ask, like, if you have folks around you that are not feeling valued, what strategies would you recommend to them to make them feel valued or feel appreciated in terms of what they're doing?
So, I think it goes back to some of what we've been talking about in terms of self-advocacy. So it may be that your partners, leaders in the organization don't see your value because they don't know what you're contributing. So make sure that you are finding authentic ways to celebrate your wins. I think Jai and I grew up in the same house because I had heard the same from my mom. Put your head down, work hard. But it's not just about that, right? It's about being able to tell a story. And frankly, if you're in a place where you're working hard, you are self-advocating, you are telling the story, and you are in a team that is not going to see your value and ultimately not allow you to make a meaningful contribution, you may need to make the choice. Do you need to move into a different work group? Leverage your network, market yourself, and find ways that you can feel valued and can contribute.
I completely agree. I think to add to that, it's also important to understand how you define feeling valued, because it's different for everyone. So do you define being valued as having been promoted? Do you define feeling valued as having been or being paid equally? Do you define feeling valued as being given special projects, or you get to travel to conferences, like I said? You are given a budget and you're able to invest in new programs. You're able to make important decisions. So I think it's really important for you to understand how you personally define value and then ask for that, right? I know that 16 years ago when I was entering into the corporate space, I defined value by being compensated really well, being promoted often, and being allowed to go to conferences. Like I said, I've been going to HACR conferences for the last 15 years. But I know a lot of the women in my network are not allowed to go to conferences like this because they don't have the budget and they don't actually know how to articulate that it's important for this organization to have representation on her behalf to be there at HACR. It stems from a number of challenges, but I think for me, that was something that I needed and I wanted and I stood up for. I made it a fact and a point to ask every organization that I joined that they paid for all of my corporate partnership and memberships. That was extremely important to me. So if they couldn't give me a salary increase, then I wanted to go to all of HACR's conferences. That was the investment that they were going to make in me, and that was so important, and there was no way that I was going to take no for an answer. And if my direct boss didn't have the funds, I'd go to HR, and I'd go to diversity, and then I'd go to the foundation, and then I'd go to the public policy department. Somebody was going to put in some dollars for me to represent the organization at HACR, and I was able to articulate why it was important for us to have a face, and that face needed to be me. And so I think it's really important to define how value is personal to you and how you can articulate that to your organization.
So I see some really great questions coming in through the chat, and I'm going to try and find a way to incorporate a couple of them into our next topic area, which is workplace challenges. And so in this particular series of questions, we asked our survey respondents if there were challenges that they felt Latinas in particular faced in the workplace, and if they could identify what they thought some of those challenges were. So stereotypes, lack of representation, lack of opportunity, lack of exposure, and work-life balance. And so we've had a couple questions that have come in about, you know, what specific advice or tools could you give me, you know, to handle a situation where I'm told I'm too aggressive or I'm condescending, or what tools do you have to help me gain that exposure, right? Like, how do I market myself effectively? And then I saw a question just a few minutes ago asking about that work-life balance and what strategies, you know, you might be able to offer for some of those folks as well, you know, who are challenged with, you know, being their self at work and doing what their job demands, but then also being who they are at home and being responsible for and taking care of everything that they need to take care of at home. So I don't know who wants to tackle which aspect of that first, but please.
I can talk a little bit about work-life balance. Actually, I was surprised that it was kind of low on the page when we saw this slide, especially in the current environment where many of us we have, you know, spouses working from home, kids, you know, homeschooling, and we're trying to balance careers. You know, as Latinos, we are often helping to care for elderly parents. There is so much that we take on as caregivers, which I think is really part of our culture and part of our nature. You know, I think work-life balance is a bit of a myth. It is never really balanced. You are either in the midst of something bigger in one place or bigger in another. In terms of advice, you know, for me, when I am at work, I am 100% at work. When I am traveling, I trust that my husband, my family, my support system are caring for my kids and they have it covered. But when I am at home, I am 100% at home. You know, when I'm at a kid, you know, my daughter's soccer game or event, I am trying not to be on my calls and really be focused and give them the attention that they need. You also have to find time for yourself, which, you know, as a woman, as a Latina, I think is hard. We are always wanting to give to others, whether it's our family or professionally. So find a time of the day that you can do something for yourself. You know, for me, I get up very early and run before my workday starts, before my kids are up and need something from me. So again, I think work-life balance is a bit of a myth. You've got to find what are your priorities and how do you integrate them.
And I want to speak a little bit on the stereotypes and biases, you know, for individuals who are experiencing being discriminated against at your current organization, or you feel stereotyped or put in a box or experiencing biases. You really have to look at this organization and figure out if it's the right place for you to be. And before you go into an organization, even during the interview process, it should be a two-way street. You shouldn't feel like they're interviewing you to see if you fit the culture. You have to make sure that this is a two-way street and you're actually interviewing them, so that when you say, this is me in my full-blown, most authentic self, can you handle that? I'm not here to fit into your culture. I'm here to add to your culture. And I think you have to do a really good job of researching these organizations. So you absolutely should check out their website. And besides all of the stock photography that they can purchase and put on their organization's websites, you have to look at the board of directors. Do you see yourself? Is there representation? Now that doesn't exactly mean, should I work for this organization? I mean, look at Google's representation, right? And so if you aspire to work at an organization, you have to at least start to understand their culture. It's absolutely okay to start reaching out to people that actually work in that department or the organization overall on LinkedIn. You should have conversations with people, or look at this organization up on Glassdoor and see what the people are saying about the culture and the inclusion and the commitment and the policies and the structure of an organization. And if you're having a challenge when it comes to lack of representation or lack of opportunity, even lack of exposure, maybe start broadening your horizons. Maybe you should start looking into other organizations like the Financial Women's Association. I've been part of that organization for 4 years. I made such a name for myself in the industry that it started to impact the current role that I was in at the time. And so start to figure out other ways that you can start elevating your professional and executive presence in the industry overall, right? And start using those opportunities to be a leader at those organizations like HACR and like the Financial Women's Association to elevate your executive brand and your professional brand overall. So start doing a lot of introspective work and really realizing or making some tough decisions about, you know, should I stay here? Do they value me? What does value mean to me? And am I represented? And if not, that's okay. Should I be the one that's going to help others reflect themselves in me for the future? That's a great goal to have. It's a challenging one, and we absolutely need that.
Thanks, Yai. Thanks, Jessica. So I want to talk about something that you just sort of brought up in lack of opportunity and some strategies that you suggested for folks when they're feeling that way, right? And we asked about opportunity. We asked how people were feeling, and less than half of our survey respondents thought that their opportunity was really promising where they were, you know, which is a little bit, I think, surprising, a little bit sad to hear, right? Because you want people to think that where they are and where they're investing their time and their talent, they feel like there is a trajectory, a career trajectory for them within that organization. But they didn't feel that way. And so I want to talk a little bit more about this and talk about, you know, what is something else that you can do besides just thinking about leaving, right? What if you really like what you do and where you are, you're just frustrated that you don't see that clear path to leadership there? What strategies could you offer to folks about dealing with that kind of situation?
So I would say never underestimate the power of a strong network. And John mentioned it, right? How are you connecting within your work team, outside of your work team, and then outside of your organization? Also think about if your company does have employee resource groups, are you actively engaged in those employee resource groups? They can act as a community that can help you to provide support, help connect you to prospects. You can meet people there that can mentor you and sponsor you. A lot of the time we are siloed in our work team, and you may not know about the other opportunities within your organization. So again, it really is, how are you connected to the broader work your company does outside of your specific work team?
Yeah, I love that, and I echo that. Even within the groups that you are associated with, for example, Latinx, Latino, or Hispanic employee resource groups, affinity groups, business resource groups, start broadening your scope. And so when I was in corporate America, I actually belonged to all of the ERGs, because not only did I want to learn about their culture and their challenges as professionals, I also wanted to see if there was an opportunity for me to be part of that leadership. I was leading the women's ERG, and that exposed me to people outside of my very siloed Latino, Hispanic, and Latinx, group within corporate America. And so when you are struggling with a lack of opportunity, start looking outside of your own box. Start leading the Latinx, or start leading the women's or the Black ERG or the Asian ERG, and that starts opening you up to a ton of other connections. And of course, there's the power of networking right from your couch and right from LinkedIn, right? If you see that you're lacking opportunity, now is the time to start networking. And of course, it is a challenge because so many organizations are being made aware of the options that they have when it comes to promoting individuals because of COVID. So that's an added layer of stress and a lack of opportunity there. There's so many hiring freezes, but you can do so much just from the power of your computer, networking internally within other organizations or in the broad sense of your industry.
I really like those suggestions of networking and sort of trying to build these cross-group alliances, because I think sometimes it's easy for us to lose sight of who else could potentially help us, who else could potentially be that person who has an opportunity for us, right? Like we're like you said, yeah, often very siloed in what we're doing, and we forget what's happening around here, right? And so that's great advice for folks who maybe find themselves in this situation. So talking now, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. You've both mentioned this at different points in the conversation, and so I kind of want to come back to it. We asked our participants about executive presence. We asked them to define it first before we asked them, if it was who they were. And we got some really interesting responses about, what executive presence includes and how it's defined. So characteristics relating to composure, confidence, credibility. I shared with you both that we often heard that it was characteristics that were defined as being white and being male. And so I just, wanted to talk a little bit about that with you. So, what do you think about this definition? Is this definition the only definition of executive presence? And, what advice could you give to folks who also are feeling like in order to have this executive presence, they have to compromise who they are? So please share your thoughts.
So I think EP is often thought of as like this intangible, right? This thing that eludes us, or, thought of as something that is very aligned to standard white male attributes, but it really isn't. If you think about it very simply, executive presence comes through confidence. So think about credibility, the leadership skills that allow you to lead and influence. Those are all things that demonstrate executive presence. Very tactically, I always tell folks, be prepared. Know your topic, know your audience, what is their expectation, have the facts. Do not underestimate the power of tone, posture, body language, and words. Don't use filler words. So don't say things like, so. Do not use phrases that are going to diminish the confidence your audience has in you. So don't say, I think this is going to work, or I think so-and-so is here. Speak from a place of fact and a place of confidence, and ultimately that is what is going to portray executive presence.
I love that. I agree on all of that. Executive presence, I think, can be embodied by anyone. And how you mentioned, Dr. Lisette, that so many people assume that executive presence is a very white male dominated figure. I absolutely think that your executive presence is you being your most authentic self, but understanding how you're moving in this space, especially your industry. What if you're in financial services? Do you feel comfortable? Are you strong enough to be able to say, you know what, I am in financial services, but I'm going to wear hot pink every day, right? You have to be able to back up everything that just like Jessica was mentioning. You have to be able to, respond back to those naysayers that could be like, oh my goodness, she wears hot pink every day. We're on Wall Street. She's got to look like a white male dominated, sort of perspective. Executive presence has everything to do with how you carry yourself, how confident you are, and how others perceive you. It has so much to do with the word gravitas, which means how others gravitate towards you. And so if you have that authenticity, if you know your stuff, you can back it up with data. You don't ever have to be worried about what people think about you when you're wearing hot pink every day, working out of Wall Street. I think it takes a lot of courage I think it takes a lot of time to figure out how you want to be special and how you want others to perceive you. I think they'll know right away how you articulate yourself and what you know about the industry. Respect is gained, right? And it takes some time. So I love executive presence. And for those people who think that executive presence is only seen in person, you can actually have executive presence online. So perhaps you're an introvert, but you love researching and you can share your opinion and you're very articulate. Use that power online to be able to write articles and share your opinion, or on the intranet, so that you can say, hey, here's what my department or what I'm working on. Here's the impact that I've made on the organization. You can start developing your executive presence online, because I've heard from so many people, oh, I'm an introvert. I don't really like being around people. I don't like networking, but I don't want to be seen as a doormat. How can I mitigate some of those things that I've heard before? And so executive presence can be held and embodied by a 15-year-old, and it can be absolutely transferred to online presence.
So great suggestions there. A lot of really good ideas for what people can do to kind of get out of this mentality or this norm of executive presence means white and male, right? There are other options there. So I want to talk a little bit now in just the few minutes that we have left about what companies can do. And I put up on the screen some of the suggestions that our survey participants came up with, things that they thought their companies could do. But I want to focus specifically on mentorship and sponsorship, because you both talked about it early on. We saw the video. We know that it's important. We know that it opens doors. We've had a number of questions that have come in, and I want to share some of those highlights with you. So someone is asking, what should they do if they're seeking sponsorship within their company but aren't part of the formal program? And someone else asked, what advice could you give for someone who's seeking a mentor that looks like them, but when they approach another Latina leader within their company, they often hear, well, I had to work hard and, I got to where I am without any support or help, so I'm not giving you a handout, right? So what advice would you share with folks who find themselves in either of those situations?
So that's very, very unfortunate, right? I think as Latinas, it is our role and responsibility to help pull up and lead others. One, I would say your mentors and sponsors don't have to look like you, and frankly, you should really have diversity in your mentors and sponsors in terms of experience and expertise, because if you have all of your mentors and sponsors look and think like you, all you're going to have is confirmation bias. You need to have that diversity of perspectives. I would say one of my biggest allies and sponsors is a white man, and he's got a seat at the table, and he's not afraid to use his voice to talk about me and talk about others. And both roles are very important. But I would say you don't have to be part of a formal program. At the bank, we have a diverse leader sponsorship program that does align diverse leaders or high-performing diverse talent to senior leaders as sponsors. But a lot of those relationships turn out best when they happen organically. So who are the people that interact with you day to day, that have exposure to the results and the work that you deliver? And then be deliberate, and even if it's uncomfortable, get comfortable asking, hey, are you willing to sponsor me? If not, why? What would I need to do? Or if you see someone that has experience or skills you want to learn and emulate, don't be afraid to ask for a mentor. It doesn't have to be some sort of rotational assignment. You should be seeking out these people when you have the opportunity to interact as part of your network.
I agree with all of that. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that, mentorship can be relationships simply based on emails. Right? Your mentor should feel like they can help you regardless of being in front of you or being on the phone with you or being on video with you. If you need help making a really big decision, reach out to someone, and you don't even have to formalize it. You don't have to ask that person, hey, can you be my mentor? That puts a lot of pressure on someone. You simply just have to say, hey, I've seen your career trajectory. I know that you don't know me personally, but I have a really big career decision to make. I wanted to ask you 3 questions that could help me in making that decision. Do you mind if I pick your brain for 10 minutes and ask you these 3 questions that are going to help me in making this decision? Or can I just email them? I appreciate your time. And is it okay in a month that I follow back up with you? So don't even feel like you have to formalize it. And a sponsor is someone that knows you personally and can put your name in the ballot when a big opportunity comes up. That takes a lot of time, and it's quite of an investment and an evolution on someone's part, and it's not something you can ask someone for. They have to be able to offer it because they believe in you and they want to see you succeed.
So we only have about a minute left. So in 30 seconds or less, ladies, there's a question that came through about what advice would you give to someone who is right at the beginning of their career?
So I would say some advice that I got very early on that has stuck with me is do the job you want, not the job you have. So don't be confined by your job description. Be willing to take on special projects and stretch work, because ultimately that's what's going to deliver the best opportunity.
I love that. I think the advice that I would share is build your own personal board of directors, someone who can advise you on your finances, on those big career decisions. Start sharing with them the conversations that you're having with your manager. And please, let's stop the fact that money and salary conversations are taboo. So start sharing with that personal board of directors what you've accomplished and what you make, your literal salary, so that they can start saying, you know what, I actually have a friend that does the same thing with your same achievements, and I think you're being underpaid. Let me help you. Start being a little bit more transparent so that other people can help you really get above and beyond.
Okay, 2 words or less, podcast or book, your favorite that you'd recommend to inspire confidence.
For me, there is one, the most popular TED Talk out there is by Amy Cuddy, and it's on body language. It's really, really important. And there's also a podcast called The Diversity Gap that talks about racial inequities and systemic challenges. I see a lot of the questions on that.
So for me, I like any TED Talk or podcast by Brene Brown. She's got a new podcast, Unlocking Us. She talks a lot about shame and guilt and what that means for us as women and how do we turn that around. And so I love anything by Brene Brown.
Great. So thank you, Jessica and Jai, for joining us today and for sharing your insights and for your continued commitment to the Hispanic community. I just put up a bit.ly link for the report if anyone would like to donate it, and would like to really thank Microsoft for their support in the Empower Her research project. Thank you again to Bank of America, today's sponsor, for their continued support and partnership. And thank you most of all to all of you, the attendees, for taking time out of your busy day to join us for the discussion. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please follow us on social media to receive important details about our upcoming virtual events later this year. And you can always go to our website for the webinar schedule and event information. So please don't forget to complete the post-event survey. It helps us to deliver content that is meaningful and interesting to you. And once again, thanks, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.